"I'd trade places with you just to have something to eat," said the beggar to the woman in the wheelchair. Deborah Thompson felt her chest tighten as she tried to ignore the ragged boy watching her through the restaurant window. For 3 weeks straight, always at the same lunch hour, there he was, his clothes patched, his faded brown beanie covering messy hair. It wasn't until his words finally pierced the glass separating her from the street that she truly noticed him. The boy pressed his face against the window and said something that made her shudder in her wheelchair. "I'd trade places with you just to have something to eat," the boy murmured, pointing at the untouched plate on her table. Deborah felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. For a moment she forgot all the bitterness she'd carried for 2 years since the accident that left her paralyzed. The boy couldn't have been more than 8, but his eyes held a sadness she recognized all too well. "Clarence, call security," she told the waiter, trying to keep her voice steady. "No need, Mrs. Thompson. He doesn't bother anyone, just stands there watching," replied Clarence, a man in his 60s who had worked at the restaurant for decades. "I don't want to see a child begging in front of me," she snapped, pushing her salad around without appetite. But the boy didn't leave. He stayed there, watching her every move with a curiosity that unsettled her. Deborah tried to eat but felt the weight of that child's gaze. When she looked up again, she saw him tracing something on the fogged glass with his finger. A heart. She swallowed hard and waved Clarence over. "Bring that boy inside." "Are you sure, Mrs. Thompson?" "Just do it before I change my mind." Clarence left and returned minutes later with the boy, who walked slowly, clearly intimidated by the elegant setting. His clothes were even more worn than Deborah had realized from afar, and she noticed he limped slightly on his left leg. "What's your name?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Ethan, ma'am. Ethan Cooper." "How old are you, Ethan?" "8, ma'am, but sometimes I feel older." The answer surprised her with its maturity. Deborah watched as he hesitated before sitting, wiping his dirty hands on his shirt before touching the chair. "Why do you keep watching me every day?" Ethan lowered his head, fiddling with the edges of his beanie. "You always look sad, even when you're eating good food. I keep wondering why someone who has everything could be like that." Deborah's heart raced. No one had noticed her sadness in months, not even her sister Pamela, who visited religiously every Sunday with empty words of encouragement. "And you? Why are you on the streets?" "My grandma's in the hospital. I don't have anyone else." "Where are your parents?" Ethan shrugged. "Never knew my dad. My mum, she left when I was 5. Said she couldn't take care of a kid and work at the same time." Deborah clenched her fists. She knew abandonment well, even if for different reasons. Since the accident, many friends had vanished from her life, unable to handle her new condition. "Clarence, bring the boy a plate," she ordered. "No need, ma'am. I just wanted to look." "Don't be stubborn. Eat." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. Clarence brought a generous plate of mac and cheese with rice, and Deborah watched as Ethan ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were his last meal. Maybe it was. "Where do you sleep?" she asked. "Different places. Sometimes in Washington Square, sometimes under the awning at CVS Pharmacy. Depends if it's raining." "And your grandmother? Which hospital is she in?" Ethan stopped eating and his expression darkened. "Mercy General Hospital. She had a heart problem. The doctors say she needs an expensive operation, but we don't have the money." Deborah knew that hospital well. It was where she had spent months after the accident, where she learned to live with the wheelchair and the pitying looks from people. But it was also a public hospital with long waiting lists for surgeries. "How long has she been there?" 3 weeks, since you started coming here for lunch." The coincidence haunted her. 3 weeks ago, Deborah had begun visiting that restaurant as a way to escape the loneliness of her empty mansion in Beverly Hills. 3 weeks ago, Ethan had lost the only person he had left in the world. "Do you visit her?" "Every day. I walk there in the morning and come back in the afternoon. It's far, but she's happy when she sees me." Deborah mentally calculated the distance. Mercy General Hospital was over 9 miles away. For an 8-year-old walking, it would be a journey of at least 3 hours each way. "How do you get money to eat?" Ethan lowered his head again, ashamed. Sometimes I ask for change at the traffic light. Sometimes I collect cans. Other times I just go without eating. Deborah's heart ached. She, who complained about everything, who constantly lamented her condition, was facing a child who endured far greater hardships with a dignity she had lost long ago. Ethan, tell me the truth. Why did you say you'd trade places with me? The boy looked up, and Deborah saw painful sincerity in his eyes. Because you have a home, food, people who care about you. I only have my grandma, and she might leave any moment. Deborah swallowed the tears threatening to spill. Ethan didn't even know she lived alone in the mansion, that she had no close family besides Pamela, that her friends had drifted away after the accident. And what would you do if you could have all that? I'd take care of my grandma, I'd buy her medicine, pay for her operation, and maybe one day she could come home with me. At that moment, Deborah made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Ethan, would you like to come with me to the hospital? The boy's eyes lit up in a way she hadn't seen in years from anyone. You'd do that for me? Let's go see your grandmother. Now. Deborah called her private driver, Michael, who was used to her sudden outing since the accident. When he saw Ethan getting into the car beside his employer, he couldn't hide his surprise but asked no questions. On the way to the hospital, Ethan shared more about his life. His grandmother, Mrs. Margaret, had been a housemaid her whole life. She raised Ethan alone after her daughter abandoned him. They worked together, collecting recyclables to supplement her meager pension, which barely covered the rent for their small apartment in the Bronx. She always said I was the most precious treasure God had given her, Ethan said, wiping a tear from his face. I just want her to get better so I can take care of her like she took care of me. Deborah saw herself reflected in those words. When she was Ethan's age, she had also promised to care for her maternal grandmother, the only person who had truly loved her unconditionally. But life had taken her before Deborah could keep that promise. Arriving at Mercy General Hospital, Deborah was met with the same run-down conditions she remembered from years ago. The overcrowded halls, the smell of disinfectant mixed with suffering, the families camped out on plastic chairs waiting for news of their loved ones. Ethan guided her through the corridors with the familiarity of someone who knew every corner of that place. They stopped in front of room 315, where through the window, Deborah could see a black woman with graying hair, looking to be about 70 years old, connected to several machines. "Grandma, I brought someone to see you," said Ethan, entering the room. Mrs. Margaret opened her eyes slowly and smiled when she saw her grandson, but when she noticed Deborah in the wheelchair, her expression filled with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. "Ethan, who is this lady?" "This is Mrs. Deborah, Grandma. She gave me food today and wanted to meet you." Margaret tried to sit up in bed to greet her properly, but was too weak. "Don't trouble yourself, Mrs. Margaret. I came here of my own free will," said Deborah, wheeling closer to the bed. "Thank you so much for being kind to my grandson, ma'am. He's a good boy, just going through a rough patch." Deborah watched the interaction between grandmother and grandson. There was genuine love there, a connection she hadn't experienced in years. Ethan held his grandmother's hand gently, as if she were made of glass. "Did the doctor come by today, Grandma?" "Yes, my dear. He said I need the surgery soon, or else it'll get much harder." Ethan swallowed hard, trying not to show his fear. Deborah noticed the boy's effort to stay strong for his grandmother. "Mrs. Margaret, if I may ask, what exactly is the problem?" "A heart valve issue, ma'am. I need 2 new valves, but the wait list at the public hospital is months long, and the doctor said I can't wait that long. And how much does the private surgery cost?" Margaret hesitated, clearly embarrassed. $80,000, Mom. But that's more money than I've ever seen in my life. Deborah did the math in her head. $80,000 was what she spent in 2 months just maintaining her home. It was less than the value of the designer purse sitting in her car at that moment. "Grandma, don't be sad. I'll get the money," said Ethan, squeezing her hand. "How, my dear? There's no way you can get that much." "I will. I'll work harder, collect more cans. You'll get better, I promise." Deborah's heart broke at the scene. an 8-year-old boy promising to raise $80,000 by collecting cans. Ethan's innocence and determination reminded her of herself as a child, when she believed sheer willpower could solve all the world's problems. "Ethan, could you give me a few minutes alone with your grandmother?" The boy hesitated, but Margaret encouraged him to go get juice from the hospital cafeteria. When they were alone, Deborah moved closer to the bed. "Mrs. Margaret, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course, Ma'am." "Do you have any other family besides Ethan?" Margaret shook her head sadly. "Just him. My daughter disappeared 3 years ago and never got in touch. Ethan is all I have left in the world. And if something were to happen to you, he'd be all alone," Margaret finished, unable to hold back tears. "That's what hurts me most, Ma'am. Not dying, but leaving that boy with no one. He doesn't deserve that." Deborah gently touched the elderly woman's hand. "Mrs. Margaret, I want to pay for your surgery." Margaret's eyes widened in disbelief. "Ma'am, I can't accept that. It's too much money." "You can and you will. I'll speak to the doctors today to schedule the surgery." "But why? You don't even know me." Deborah thought for a few seconds before answering. "Because your grandson taught me something today that I'd forgotten long ago. He showed me that even with so little, he still dreams of taking care of those he loves. I have so much, and I don't do that for anyone." Margaret began to cry, but they were tears of gratitude and relief. "How can I ever thank you for this?" "By getting better and continuing to take care of Ethan, he needs you." When Ethan returned with the juice, he found the two women talking like old friends. Deborah had discovered that Margaret was a wise woman who had raised Ethan with strong values, despite facing so many hardships. "Ethan, I have news for you," Deborah said when the boy sat by the bed. "Your grandmother is having her surgery next week." "What? But the waiting list is so long." "It won't be at the public hospital. I'm paying for her to have it done privately." Ethan fell silent for a few seconds, trying to process the information. "You're going to pay $80,000 for my grandma?" "I am." The boy ran out of the room. Deborah and Margaret grew worried, thinking he had been frightened by the situation. But Ethan returned a few minutes later, his eyes red from crying. "I don't know how to thank you, Mrs. Thompson. You're an angel." "I'm no angel, Ethan. Just someone who forgot how important it is to help others." That afternoon, Deborah took care of every detail. She spoke with the doctors, arranged the payments, and scheduled the surgery for the following Monday. Ethan stayed close to her, still in shock over the sudden change in their lives. When they said goodbye at the hospital, Ethan did something that surprised Deborah. He pulled a small, smooth, shiny stone from his pocket. "I found this on the street last week. I thought it was pretty and kept it. I want you to have it." Deborah took the little stone and felt how warm it still was from the boy's pocket. "Why do you want to give this to me?" "Because it's the most precious thing I have, and you deserve it." On the way home, Deborah stayed quiet, playing with the stone in her hands. Michael, her driver, watched her in the rearview mirror, surprised by his boss's change in demeanor. "Mrs. Thompson, if I may say so, it's been a while since I've seen you so lively." "That's true, Michael. I think I found something I'd lost." "What was it, if I may ask?" "A purpose." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, Deborah couldn't stop thinking about Ethan and Margaret. For the first time in 2 years, she woke up wanting to get out of bed, eager to know how they were preparing for the surgery. On Friday, she decided to visit them again. Arriving at the hospital, she found Ethan asleep in an uncomfortable chair beside his grandmother's bed. Margaret was awake and smiled when she saw her. "Ethan hasn't wanted to leave since Monday. He says he needs to take care of me before the operation." Deborah watched the sleeping boy. He looked even smaller, curled up in that chair, his crooked beanie half covering his face. His clothes were the same ones he'd worn 4 days ago. "Mrs. Margaret, Ethan needs a bath and clean clothes. He can't stay like this." "I know, ma'am, but he won't even leave to get fresh clothes from our small apartment in the Bronx." Deborah made an impulsive decision. "I'm taking him to my house today. He needs rest and proper food." I don't know if he'll agree to leave me here alone. Let's convince him together. When Ethan woke up, it took him a few minutes to realize where he was. Seeing Deborah, he smiled tiredly. Mrs. Thompson, you came to see my grandma. I came to see both of you. Ethan, you need to leave here for a few hours. I can't leave my grandma alone. You won't help anyone if you get sick from exhaustion, Margaret interjected. Go with Mrs. Thompson, take a bath, eat something good. I'll be here when you get back. But what if something happens while I'm gone? Ethan, look at me, Deborah said, holding the boy's hands. I promise if anything happens, my driver will bring you back here in a flash. But your grandmother needs you strong for after the surgery. After much convincing, Ethan agreed to go with Deborah. On the way to the mansion in Beverly Hills, he was amazed by the size of the house, the well-kept garden, and the pool glistening under the afternoon sun. Do you live alone in all this? I do. After my accident, a lot changed in my life. What kind of accident? Deborah hesitated. It had been a long time since she'd talked about it with anyone. A car accident, 2 years ago. Because of it, I can't walk anymore. Ethan absorbed the information in silence for a few minutes. Were you driving? No. My husband was. And where is he now? Deborah felt the familiar pain tighten her chest. He didn't survive the accident, Ethan. The boy stopped walking and looked at her with an understanding beyond his years. You lost your husband? And couldn't walk after? That's right. Now I understand why you looked sad at the garden bistro. Deborah was surprised by the boy's sensitivity. In just a few words, he had grasped what therapists had spent months trying to explain. Inside the house, Ethan took his first hot shower in weeks. Deborah had asked her housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, to set aside some clean clothes from her nephew, who was around the same age. When Ethan came down for dinner, he looked like a different boy. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Deborah. It's been a while since I felt this clean. During dinner, Ethan ate with the appetite of someone who didn't know when his next meal would be. Deborah watched his every move, impressed by his good manners, despite his circumstances. Ethan, your grandmother taught you well. She always said being poor wasn't an excuse for bad manners, that I needed to be a boy she could be proud of. And she is proud. Anyone would be proud of you. After dinner, they sat in the living room. Ethan was fascinated by the number of books on Deborah's shelf. Have you read all of these? Most of them. Why? Do you like to read? I do, but I'm not very good at it. My grandma tried to teach me, but she doesn't know much herself. Have you never been to school? Ethan shook his head sadly. My grandma wanted to enroll me, but something always came up. Sometimes we didn't have money for supplies. Sometimes she got sick and I had to work to buy medicine. Deborah felt indignation rise within her. How could a bright boy like Ethan be deprived of an education just because of money? Ethan, once your grandmother gets better, we'll figure out this school situation. You'd do that too? Of course. Children should go to school. That night, Ethan slept in the guest room of the mansion. Deborah stayed up late thinking about how her life had changed in just a week. For the first time since the accident, she felt she had a reason to wake up the next day. On Saturday morning, she woke to the sound of voices in the garden. Through the window, she saw Ethan talking to Michael, who was cleaning the car. The boy asked questions about everything, curious and polite as ever. Good morning, Ethan. Did you sleep well? I did, Mrs. Deborah. Thank you for letting me stay in the most beautiful house I've ever seen. You can stay here whenever you want. During breakfast, Ethan asked a question that surprised her. Mrs. Deborah, do you have any children? No, Ethan. My husband and I wanted to, but we never could. And now that he's gone? Now it's just me. Ethan grew thoughtful for a few minutes. You know, I've always wanted a real mother, someone who cared about me like my grandma does. Deborah's heart raced. There was something in the way Ethan spoke that awakened a maternal instinct she thought she'd lost forever. Ethan, do you see your grandmother as a mother? I do. She's everything to me. But sometimes I imagine what it would be like to have a big family with lots of people who love me. That afternoon, they returned to the hospital together. Margaret was moved to see Ethan rested and well fed. Thank you so much, Mrs. Deborah. I don't know how to repay such kindness. You don't need to repay anything. Ethan did me more good than you can imagine. How so? Deborah looked at Ethan, who was organizing Margaret's few personal belongings on the hospital nightstand. He reminded me of what's important in life. He made me feel useful again. On Sunday, the day before the surgery, Deborah decided to stay at the hospital with Ethan. They spent the whole day talking with Margaret, trying to keep her calm and confident for the procedure. "Mrs. Margaret, I have a confession to make," Deborah said that night when Ethan had fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed. "Go ahead, Mom." "These past few days have been the best I've had in 2 years. Ethan brought a light into my life that I thought had gone out forever. He has that gift. He's always been a special child. I'd like to propose something, but I don't want you to feel pressured." Margaret looked at her curiously. "What would it be?" "After you recover, I'd like you both to come live with me. The house is too big for one person, and Ethan needs to go to school." Margaret was silent for so long that Deborah thought she had offended the elderly woman. "Ma'am, that would be too much." "It wouldn't be too much at all. It would be a blessing for me. But we can't afford to pay. I don't want payment, I want companionship, I want a family." Margaret began to cry silently. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know perfectly well. Ethan gave me back my will to live. You both would give me back my will to have a family." On Monday morning, the entire medical team was prepared for Margaret's surgery. Ethan was nervous, pacing back and forth in the waiting room. "What if something goes wrong, Mrs. Deborah?" "Nothing will go wrong. Your grandmother is strong and the doctors are the best." "But what if—" "Ethan, look at me," Deborah said, holding the boy's trembling hands. "Your grandmother will be fine, and when she comes out of surgery, both of you will have a new life." "How so?" "Last night, I talked to her about you, both coming to live with me." Ethan's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. Do you want to be my son, Ethan?" The boy began to cry and threw himself into Deborah's arms, who hugged him with all her strength. In that moment, she knew she had found what she didn't even realize she was searching for, a reason to live again. The surgery lasted 4 hours. They were the longest 4 hours of Ethan and Deborah's lives. They waited together, talking about the future, making plans, dreaming of the new life that awaited them. When the doctor finally appeared in the waiting room, Ethan jumped up. "Doctor, how's my grandma?" "The surgery was a complete success. Your grandmother is recovering very well." Ethan shouted with joy and hugged Deborah again. She was crying too, but with happiness and relief. "When can we see her?" Deborah asked. "She's still in recovery, but in a few hours you can visit briefly." When they finally saw Margaret, she was awake and smiled at them. "How do you feel, Grandma?" "I feel new, my dear, like I've been given a second chance at life." "And you have," Deborah said. "We all have." In the following weeks, as Margaret recovered in the hospital, Ethan began living temporarily in Deborah's mansion in Beverly Hills. The change was astonishing for both of them. The house, which once echoed with loneliness, now buzzed with the energy of a child. Ethan explored every corner of the property with the natural curiosity of his age. Deborah, in turn, rediscovered the joy of caring for someone, of worrying about another person's well-being. "Mrs. Jenkins, can I ask you something?" said Ethan one morning as they had breakfast together. "Of course, Ethan. You can ask me anything." "Why did you want to send me away that first day? I wasn't bothering anyone." Deborah sighed, knowing this moment would come. "Because I was angry at the world, Ethan. I thought everyone was trying to take advantage of me. But I was just looking." "I know, but I had become a bitter person. The accident didn't just take my legs, it took away my ability to trust people. And now? Now you've taught me that there are still good people in the world. People like you and your grandmother." Ethan was thoughtful for a few minutes. "You know, that first day I didn't want to trade places with you because of the food." No. I wanted to trade because you looked sadder than I was, and I thought if I were in your place I could make you happy." Deborah was moved by his answer. Even while starving on the streets, Ethan had worried about a stranger's sadness. "And you did make me happy, you know." "I did?" "Yes, you did. You gave me the most precious thing there is, a family." During that time, Deborah made sure Ethan had everything he needed: new clothes, toys, books. But what stood out most was how the boy received everything with gratitude, never asking for more than necessary. She also began teaching him to read better and do basic math, preparing him to start school as soon as Margaret fully recovered. "Ethan, you're a very smart boy. You'll do great in school." "You really think so?" "I'm sure of it. And when you grow up, you can choose any profession you want." "I want to be a doctor, to help people like the doctor helped my grandma." "Then you'll be a doctor. I'll make sure you get the best education possible." 3 weeks after the surgery, Margaret was discharged. Her recovery had been exceptional, surprising even the doctors. When she arrived at Deborah's mansion in Beverly Hills, she was amazed at the changes in Ethan. "My God, how you've grown," she said, hugging her grandson. "It's because I'm eating right, Grandma, and Mrs. Jenkins is teaching me to read hard books." Margaret looked around the mansion, still in disbelief at their new reality. "Mrs. Jenkins, I don't know how to thank you for all this." "Mrs. Jenkins? Margaret, you're the ones who saved me. I was lost in my own sadness." That night at dinner, Deborah made an official announcement. "I'd like you both to consider me part of your family from now on. And I want to consider you my family too." Ethan jumped from his chair and ran to hug her. "Does that mean you're my mom now? If you want me to be." "I do." Margaret was also moved by the scene. "Mrs. Jenkins, you're giving us so much more than a home. You're giving us hope." In the following months, their lives changed completely. Ethan was enrolled in one of the best private schools in the city and quickly excelled in his studies. Margaret, now fully recovered, became a treasured companion for Deborah with her life stories and wisdom. But not everything was perfect. Deborah's sister, Pamela, didn't take well to the new family arrangement. "Deborah, have you lost your mind? You brought 2 strangers to live in your house," she said during one of her Sunday visits. "They're not strangers. They're my family." "Family? How long have you known them? 3 months?" "Pamela, they've done more for me in 3 months than you have in 2 years." "That's ungrateful. I've always been here for you." "You've been here out of obligation. Ethan and Mrs. Jenkins are here out of love." The argument ended with Pamela storming out in anger, vowing this wasn't over. Deborah was shaken by her sister's reaction, but Ethan noticed her sadness. "Mrs. Jenkins, did I do something wrong?" "No, Ethan, you didn't do anything wrong. Some people just have trouble accepting change. Your sister doesn't like me and Grandma. She doesn't know you yet. Once she gets to know you better, she'll understand why you're so special." But Pamela didn't give up. A few weeks later, she returned with a lawyer in tow. "Deborah, I'm very concerned about your mental state. You're making decisions without thinking them through." "What decisions?" "Adopting 2 people you barely know, spending your money on them. That's not normal." The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, your sister is considering filing for guardianship. She believes you're not mentally fit to manage your affairs." Deborah was shocked. Guardianship meant she'd lose control over her own life and money. "Pamela, how could you do this to me?" "It's for your own good, Deborah. These people are taking advantage of you." Ethan, who had been in the garden when the lawyer arrived, overheard the conversation and was terrified. He ran to where Margaret was preparing lunch. "Grandma, they want to take Mrs. Jenkins away from us." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Her sister brought a man in a suit and they're saying Mrs. Jenkins can't handle her own money." Margaret stopped what she was doing and went to the living room, where she found Deborah pale, being questioned by the lawyer. "Excuse me," Margaret said, entering the room. "Can someone tell me what's going on?" "And who are you?" Pamela asked disdainfully. "I'm Margaret Cooper, Mrs. Thompson's adoptive mother." "Adoptive mother? That's ridiculous." Deborah steadied herself and looked firmly at her sister. "Pamela, I've never been clearer in my life. Ethan and Mrs. Cooper saved me from depression and gave me a reason to live." "That's emotional manipulation," the lawyer insisted. "Emotional manipulation?" Margaret repeated, with the dignity of someone who had raised a family alone. "Sir, I took care of Mrs. Thompson when she was crying alone every night. My grandson brought her smile back. If that's manipulation, then I'd take our manipulation over her family's indifference any day." Ethan walked into the room then, shy but determined. "Mrs. Jenkins, if you want us to leave so we don't cause trouble." "You're not going anywhere," Deborah said firmly. "This is your home too." "Deborah, be reasonable," Pamela pressed. "I am reasonable. You're the ones who aren't. Pamela, you only showed up here on Sundays for half an hour, always in a hurry to leave. Ethan and Mrs. Cooper live with me, take care of me, and keep me company every day." The lawyer tried another approach. "Mrs. Thompson, think carefully. You've only known these people for a few months. How can you be sure of their intentions?" Deborah looked at Ethan and Margaret, then turned back to the lawyer. "Let me tell you a story, Doctor. 4 months ago, I was a bitter woman living alone in this house, with no will to live. Ethan was an 8-year-old boy starving on the streets, yet he still worried about my sadness. He said he'd trade places with me just to have food, but really, he wanted to trade places to make me happy. That's not exploitation. That's unconditional love." Pamela visibly flinched at her sister's words. "Ethan never asked me for anything except food to ease his hunger. When I offered him money, he refused. When I paid for his grandmother's surgery, he gave me a little rock from the street as thanks, saying it was the most precious thing he had. You call that exploitation?" The lawyer realized the case was lost. It was clear to anyone that Deborah was of sound mind and had found a real family. "Pamela, I think we should reconsider this," he murmured. "No," said Pamela, beginning to realize her own mistake. "Deborah, I just wanted to protect you." "Protect me from what? From happiness?" Pamela couldn't answer. She looked at Ethan, who was watching her with wide, frightened eyes, then at Margaret, who maintained a silent dignity. "I think I made a mistake," she finally admitted. "Yes, you did," said Deborah, "but you can still fix it." Pamela approached Ethan, who instinctively hid behind Margaret. "Ethan, I'm sorry, I was wrong." The boy looked at Deborah, as if asking permission to accept the apology. "You can talk to her, Ethan. She's my sister, and now she's your aunt too." "Aunt Pamela, don't you really like us?" Pamela knelt to be at the boy's eye level. "It's not that I don't like you, I was just afraid of losing my sister." "But you won't lose her. Now we're a big family." Ethan's simple words touched Pamela's heart in a way she hadn't expected. For the first time, she saw the sincerity and purity that had won Deborah over. "Ethan, do you forgive me?" The boy looked again at Deborah, and then at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. "I forgive you. But promise you won't try to separate us again." "I promise." The lawyer left awkwardly, and Pamela stayed for lunch. It was the first time in years she had remained at her sister's house for more than 2 hours. During the meal, she talked with Margaret and discovered a wise and interesting woman. Ethan, ever curious, asked countless questions about the aunt he'd just met. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. By late afternoon, as Pamela prepared to leave, she pulled Deborah aside. "Sister, I owe you an apology too." "It's already forgiven, Pamela." "No, I need to say it. After your accident, I came here out of obligation. I didn't know how to handle your sadness, so I pretended everything was fine and left as quickly as possible." "I knew that." Ethan is 8 years old and managed to do what I, your 45-year-old sister, couldn't. He gave you back your joy for life. Deborah hugged her sister tenderly. "It's never too late to start over, Pamela. Now you're part of this family too." From that day on, the family dynamic changed completely. Pamela began visiting the house several times a week, developing a special bond with Ethan and deeply respecting Margaret. Ethan quickly adapted to school and soon became one of the top students in his class. His teachers were impressed by his dedication and maturity. At home, he divided his time between studies and precious moments with his 2 grandmothers, as he had started calling Deborah and Margaret. "Mrs. Deborah, can I ask you something?" he said one afternoon as they worked on homework together. "Always, Ethan? Do you still miss walking?" The question caught Deborah off guard. It had been months since anyone brought it up. "Sometimes, yes. Why?" "Because I want you to know it doesn't matter to me. You're perfect just the way you are." Deborah had to hold back tears in front of the boy. "Thank you, Ethan. You don't know how much those words mean to me." And I want you to know that when I grow up, I'll invent a machine so you can walk again. Ethan, that might not be possible. Yes, it will. I'll study hard and become the best doctor in the world. Then I'll cure you and everyone else with the same problem. The determination in the boy's voice was so strong, Deborah almost believed he could do it. 6 months after they met, the family received news that would change their lives once again. Ethan's school called to inform them that he had been selected for a special program for gifted students. Gifted? Repeated Deborah over the phone with the principal. Yes, ma'am. Ethan has exceptional intellectual abilities. He's already mastered material usually taught in high school. When Deborah shared the news with the family, Ethan looked confused. What does gifted mean? It means you're very smart, my dear, explained Margaret, beaming with pride. Smarter than other kids? Not smarter, Deborah corrected. You just learn differently and faster. Is that good or bad? It's wonderful, Ethan. It means you really can become the doctor you've always dreamed of being. The special program would allow Ethan to accelerate his studies, but it would also demand more dedication. Deborah didn't hesitate to hire the best tutors to support him. During this time, Margaret became an essential part of their daily life. She took care of the household with special care, treating every detail as if she were tending to her own family. And that's exactly what she was doing. Mrs. Margaret, you don't have to do so much, Deborah would say whenever she found her cleaning or cooking. Oh, but I do, Mrs. Deborah. This is my home too, and I love taking care of my family. The two women developed a deep friendship, built on mutual respect and their shared love for Ethan. Deborah learned from Margaret to appreciate life's simple joys, while Margaret marveled at Deborah's generosity and personal growth. A year after their first meeting at the Garden Bistro, Deborah decided to throw a party to celebrate. She invited Pamela, some close friends, and all the staff from Ethan's school. Ethan, what would you like as a gift? She asked him the night before the party. I don't need a gift, Mrs. Deborah. I already have everything I've ever wanted. What have you always wanted? A family who truly loves me. At the party, Ethan surprised everyone with a speech he had prepared himself. A year ago, I was a boy going hungry on the streets, but I wasn't unhappy because I had my grandma with me. When I met Mrs. Deborah, I said I'd trade places with her just to have food. Now I know I don't need to trade places with anyone because I found where I belong. The guests were moved by his words. Margaret cried with pride, and Deborah held Ethan's hand tightly. Mrs. Deborah taught me that being different isn't a flaw, that being in a wheelchair doesn't make anyone less important, and I want to teach her that being gifted doesn't make me different from other kids either. We're all special in our own way. After the party, when they were alone, Deborah hugged Ethan with all the love she felt. You've become the son I always dreamed of having, Ethan. And you've become the mother I always dreamed of having. 2 years flew by. Ethan had advanced several grades and was already taking high school level courses even though he was only 10. His dream of becoming a doctor seemed closer than ever. Margaret, now 72, was strong and healthy, cherishing every moment with her new family. She had become a beloved figure in the neighborhood, known for her wisdom and kindness. Deborah had discovered a new passion, working with charities that supported vulnerable children. She used her experience with Ethan to help other families, always with Margaret's enthusiastic support. Mrs. Deborah, there's a child at the shelter who reminds me so much of Ethan when we first met, she said during one of their visits. How so? He's a 9-year-old boy who takes care of his younger siblings. He has the same sad eyes, but also the same inner strength. Do you think we should meet him? I think so. Ethan would be happy to have a brother. When Deborah told Ethan about the boy, his eyes sparkled with excitement. Are you going to adopt him too? Only if you all agree. After all, this decision affects the whole family. I agree. I've always wanted a brother to play and study with. What about you, Mrs. Margaret? My heart has room for one more child. The next day, they all went together to meet Justin, a 9-year-old boy who had taken on the responsibility of caring for his 3 younger siblings after his parents disappeared. The situation deeply moved the family. Justin, would you like to come live with us? Deborah asked. What about my brothers and sisters? Your siblings too, of course. All of us? All of you. Family stays together. Justin looked at Ethan, who smiled encouragingly. You'll like living with us. Mrs. Deborah is the best mom in the world, and Grandma Margaret makes the best apple pie you'll ever taste. 3 months later, Deborah's mansion in Beverly Hills was home to a family of 7. Her, Margaret, Ethan, Justin, and the 3 younger siblings, 6-year-old Emily, 4-year-old Michael, and little Olivia, just 2 years old. The house, which once echoed with loneliness, now buzzed with laughter, games, and lively conversations. Deborah had converted some rooms to comfortably accommodate all the children. Mrs. Deborah, are you sure this isn't too much? Margaret asked one afternoon as they watched the 5 children playing in the garden. Margaret, look at me. When was the last time you saw me sad? The elderly woman thought for a moment and smiled. I don't remember. Since Ethan came into our lives, you've only smiled. Then your question is answered. Each of these children has brought more joy into my life. Ethan had adapted perfectly to his role as the oldest brother. He helped Justin with his studies, played patiently with the younger ones, and always protected Emily when she felt overwhelmed by the new situation. Ethan, don't you feel jealous sharing Mrs. Deborah's attention? Justin asked one night as they got ready for bed. Why would I feel jealous? Because it was just you before, and now there are 5 of us. Ethan thought for a moment before answering. Justin, before this, I had no family at all. Now I have a mom, a grandma, and 4 siblings. How could I be jealous of gaining so much? The answer touched Justin deeply. He was used to competing for attention and resources, but in this house there was enough love for everyone. On the 3rd anniversary of Deborah and Ethan's first meeting, the family had become a role model in the city. Deborah was invited to speak at conferences about adoption and social inclusion, always accompanied by Ethan, who impressed audiences with his intelligence and maturity. Mrs. Deborah, can I ask you something? Ethan said on one such occasion, after an especially emotional talk. Always, my dear. Do you think if the accident hadn't happened, we would have met? The question caught Deborah off guard. It was something she'd never considered. Why do you ask? Because if you hadn't been sad at the garden bistro, maybe you wouldn't have noticed me. And if I hadn't been hungry on the street, I wouldn't have stopped to look at you. Deborah reflected on the boy's words and realized the depth of his observation. You know, Ethan, maybe you're right. Maybe my accident was necessary for us to find each other. So it was a good thing that happened. If it let me meet you and Mrs. Margaret, then yes, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Ethan smiled and hugged Deborah tightly. I think it was good too, because if I hadn't gone hungry, I wouldn't have met the best mum in the world. At that moment, Deborah fully understood what Ethan had said on the first day. He didn't want to trade places with her for food. He wanted to trade to ease his sadness. And in the end, they didn't need to switch places. They found a place where both could be happy together. 5 years after their first meeting, Ethan turned 15 as the youngest college student in the country. He had been accepted into the medical program at the best university, fulfilling his childhood dream. Mom, he said. He had stopped calling Deborah Mrs. long ago. I want my first surgery to be on you. On me? I want to be the doctor who helps you walk again. Ethan, we've talked about this. It's not always possible, but I'll try. And if surgery doesn't work, I'll invent new technology. I promise that before I turn 30, you'll dance at my wedding. Deborah laughed at her son's determination. And who says you're getting married? I don't know who yet, but when it happens, I want you to walk me down the aisle. Margaret, now 77, was still the healthy and wise matriarch of the family. Justin had become an excellent student and dreamed of being a teacher. Emily showed talent for the arts, Michael for sports, and little Olivia, now 7, already displayed the same exceptional intelligence as Ethan. Grandma Margaret, Olivia said one afternoon, do you think all of us will achieve our dreams like Ethan did? I'm sure of it, my dear. In our family, those who dream big and work hard always get what they want. And what was your dream, Grandma? Margaret looked around, watching all the children playing in the garden, Deborah working happily in her office, and smiled. My dream was to see my grandson grow up happy and secure, but life gave me much more than I dreamed. A big family full of love. During dinner that night, Deborah made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Family, I have news for you." All the children stopped eating and looked at her expectantly. "I've been offered a chance to write a book telling our story." "A book about us?" Emily asked excitedly. "About how we met and became a family." "And will you accept?" Justin wanted to know. "Only if you all agree. After all, it's everyone's story." Ethan, always the most thoughtful, asked the question on everyone's mind. "And what would the title be?" Deborah smiled and looked at each face around the table. "I'd trade places with you just to eat. The story of how we discovered love multiplies when shared." "I like it," Olivia said, clapping. "But it has to tell the whole truth," Michael insisted. "That you were tough at first and almost didn't let Ethan into the cafeteria. And that I cried in secret because I was scared about Grandma's surgery," Ethan added. "And that I didn't believe someone could be so generous without wanting anything in return," Margaret finished. "We'll tell everything," Deborah promised. "The hard moments and the joyful ones, so others know it's always possible to start over." 6 months later, the book was published and became a national success. The story touched thousands of families and inspired many adoptions. Deborah donated all the profits to organizations helping vulnerable children. Ethan, now in his 3rd year of medical school, had become even more determined in his goal to help people with physical disabilities. He participated in advanced research projects and had already published scientific papers. "Mom, I have a surprise for you," he said one morning, entering Deborah's room with an envelope. "What is it?" "I've been accepted into an exchange program in Boston. I'll study with the best neurosurgeons in the world." "Ethan, that's wonderful. But I know it's far from home, but it's only for 2 years, and I'll come back ready to keep our promise." "What promise?" "To see you walk again." Deborah hugged her son, proud of his determination, but with a heavy heart at the thought of their separation. "Ethan, you don't have to do this for me. It's not just for you, Mom. It's for everyone in the same situation who've lost hope." 2 years passed quickly as passed. Ethan returned from the US as one of the country's youngest specialists in neurology and rehabilitation. He had developed an innovative technique that was revolutionizing spinal cord injury treatment. "Mum, are you ready?" he asked, stepping into Deborah's room one October morning. "Ready for what?" "For your first appointment with Dr. Ethan Cooper, specialist in neurological rehabilitation." Deborah laughed, but realized Ethan was serious. "Ethan, we've talked about this. Mum, trust me. I just want to run some tests, see if there's a chance for a new treatment." 3 hours later, at the hospital where it had all begun with Margaret's surgery, Ethan reviewed Deborah's test results with a team of specialists. "Dr. Cooper," the lead physician said, "I think your mother could be a candidate for the new treatment." "Are you sure?" "Her injuries aren't as extensive as we initially thought. With the new technique, there's a 60% chance of partial mobility recovery." Ethan's heart raced. After all these years, there was finally real hope. "And the risks?" "Minimal. The procedure is less invasive than traditional techniques." When Ethan shared the news with Deborah, she couldn't believe it. "Ethan, is this real?" "Completely real, Mom. Do you want to try?" Deborah looked at her son, the boy she'd once known hungry on the streets, now a renowned doctor offering her the chance to walk again. "Of course I want to try." The surgery was scheduled for a month later. During that time, the whole family rallied around Deborah. Margaret, now 80 but still strong, took charge of the household. Justin, now a graduate in education, looked after the younger kids. Emily, Michael, and Olivia made encouraging posters to hang in their mother's room. "Mom," Olivia said the night before the surgery, "if it works, will you be able to run and play with us?" "If it works, the first thing I'll do is play tag with you in the yard." "And will you be able to drive by yourself?" "I'll be able to do so many things I haven't done in years." "What if it doesn't work? Will you be sad?" Deborah hugged her youngest. "Olivia, if it doesn't work, I'll still be the same happy mom I am today. Because what makes me happy isn't my legs, it's all of you." On the day of the surgery, the whole family was at Mercy General Hospital. Ethan led the medical team, nervous but confident. Margaret prayed in the chapel, while the other kids played in the waiting room, trying to stay calm. The surgery lasted 8 hours, the longest 8 hours of their lives. Ethan emerged exhausted but smiling. "How did it go?" Margaret asked, the first to approach. "It was perfect, Grandma. Better than we hoped. And when will we know if it worked?" "In the next few hours. Once the anesthesia wears off, we'll do the first tests." 6 hours later, Deborah woke up surrounded by her family. Ethan held her hand anxiously. "Mum, how do you feel?" "Good. A little groggy, but good." "Mum, can you try moving your toes?" Deborah focused all her energy on her feet. Slowly, miraculously, her toes moved. The room erupted in cheers. Margaret wept with emotion. The kids jumped on the bed, and Ethan hugged his mother with tears in his eyes. "It worked, Mom. It worked." In the following weeks, Deborah underwent an intensive physical therapy program. Slowly, she regained movement in her legs. First, she managed to stand with support, then take a few shaky steps, until she could finally walk on her own. The day she walked down the stairs at home was a celebration for the whole family. Margaret, who had witnessed so many miracles in her life, declared this was the greatest of them all. "Mrs. Deborah, seeing you walk is like watching my grandson fulfill the dream he's had since childhood. No, Mrs. Margaret, seeing all of you happy is what fulfills a dream." A year after the surgery, Ethan graduated from medical school with honors. During his graduation speech, he shared his family's story and dedicated his diploma to Deborah. "When I was 8 years old and starving on the streets, I met a woman in a wheelchair who looked very sad. I told her I'd trade places with her just to have something to eat. Today, 15 years later, I can say we didn't need to trade places. We found a place where both of us could be happy and whole. And now, as a doctor, I want to help others find their place in the world too." 2 years later, Ethan married Jessica, a physical therapist he'd met during his residency. As promised, Deborah walked him down the aisle, wearing a blue dress Olivia had specially picked for the occasion. "Mum," Ethan whispered as they walked toward the altar, "thank you for teaching me that love has no limits. Thank you for teaching me to love again, my son." Margaret, now 85, watched the ceremony from the front row, proud to see the grandson she'd raised become a good and successful man. Beside her, Justin, Emily, Michael, and Olivia were overcome with emotion. During the reception, Deborah gave a toast that moved everyone present. 20 years ago, I met a boy who said he'd trade places with me just to have a meal. Today, he's a respected doctor, a wonderful son, and a man who dedicates his life to helping others. Ethan taught me that it doesn't matter where we come from or what hardships we face. What matters is how we choose to love and be loved. Ethan stood and hugged Deborah in front of all the guests. "Mom, you gave me so much more than food that first day. You gave me a family, an education, and most importantly, unconditional love. Now I pass that lesson on to my wife and the children we'll have." Jessica, the bride, joined the embrace. "Deborah, thank you for raising the man I married, and thank you for welcoming me into this amazing family." "Jessica, you've always been family. We were just waiting for you to arrive." 3 years after Ethan's wedding, Deborah's home was livelier than ever. Ethan and Jessica had twins, Jacob and Grace, who spent weekends with their grandmother. Justin had married and also had a young son. Emily was dating a guy from art school. Michael had become a professional soccer player. Olivia, now 17, was following in Ethan's footsteps and had been accepted into medical school. Margaret, now 88, was still the heart of the family. She cared for her great-grandchildren with the same patience she'd shown Ethan years before. "Grandma Margaret," Ethan said one Sunday afternoon as they watched the children play in the yard, "do you remember what you told me at Mercy General Hospital the day I met Mom?" "What was it, dear?" "You said I was the most precious treasure God had given you, and you are. But now I see you were wrong about one thing." Margaret looked at him curiously. "About what?" "You weren't just blessed with one treasure. You became the treasure of this whole family. Mom, Jessica, the kids. We're all rich because we have you." Margaret was moved by her grandson's words. "Ethan, my life has become so much more than I ever dreamed. When your mother left you, I thought we'd have to face the world alone. I never imagined we'd have such a big family, so full of love. And it all started because a hungry boy looked at a sad woman through a store window. No, Ethan. It all started because a hungry boy had a heart generous enough to care about a stranger's sadness. At that moment, Olivia walked up to them. "What are you two talking about?" "About how our family began," Ethan replied. "Grandma, tell the story again about how Ethan met Mom." Margaret smiled and began telling the story for the 1000th time, one she never tired of sharing. Once upon a time, there was a very brave boy who went hungry on the streets, but his heart was bigger than his belly. Deborah, who had come closer to listen, smiled at the familiar words. 10 years after regaining her ability to walk, she still marveled at the journey they had taken together. Looking at her family gathered in the garden, Ethan holding the little ones in his lap, Jessica helping Emily with preparations for her graduation, Justin teaching Michael ball tricks, Margaret telling stories to Olivia, Deborah remembered the words Ethan had said on that first day. He had told her he'd trade places with her just to have something to eat. But in truth, they hadn't traded places. They had found a place where both of them could truly be happy, and that place was called family. The end of the story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story. Do you believe love can transform lives like it did for Deborah and Ethan? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know if you've ever had an experience that changed your life forever. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories.